From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Marcela Bayeto. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we take a look at stories from our sustainability reporting team, how researchers are monitoring CO2 levels, and why pelicans were making a stop in Arizona.
The Trump administration notified the United Nations earlier this month that the U.S. is officially withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. That's an international pledge made by nearly 200 nations to cut greenhouse gas emissions.
The U.S. is the first country to leave the agreement, a process that takes a year to complete. Many countries involved in the agreement collaborate on climate research.
One example of this is a recent special report created by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Ted Scher from Northern Arizona University wrote part of this report, and I spoke with him recently about his research. An IPCC special report released in September zeroed in on the ocean, the liquid parts and the frozen parts. Ted Scher is interested in the frozen, but it's difficult to research that from sunny Arizona.
I do a lot of my field work in Alaska. What's very unique about it is that even though there's a forest growing, if you dig into the ground, it's frozen.
He digs to find carbon, which helps scientists understand how quickly the climate is changing. And some of these changes hit close to home.
For people in Arizona, this sounds far away, but it turns out that the changes that are happening there are affecting people no matter where you live.
Some of the secrets to climate change can be found in frozen soil. And no, this isn't a burrito.
This dark brown is 40 to 50% carbon. There's all of this organic carbon locked up, and when that starts to get warmer and it thaws, it turns into these greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane. Those are released back into the atmosphere, and that affects climate everywhere, including the temperatures in Phoenix.
Elaine Pegararo works in Scher's lab at NAU.
These were collected from Healy, Alaska.
She's monitoring the carbon dioxide levels in these soil samples. She puts mason jars in these coolers, attaches tubes, and after the carbon dioxide levels are calculated, all the data is sent right to her computer. And for the gas to be analyzed, everything else has to be filtered out. That's where Chris Ebert comes in.
We ultimately turn the carbon dioxide into carbon, graphite, and that's how it's analyzed for C14. This gives us a chance to make sure there isn't any atmospheric gases trapped in with the carbon dioxide. It's frozen on this side, and it's really, really hot on that side.
Another special IPCC report from 2018 finds that if global temperatures rise by more than 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit in the coming decades, species will go extinct, sea levels will continue to rise, and our food and water supply will decrease.
You know, the Earth is going to continue to change and the climate will change, but we have choices to make, and we could alter the future that we end up in.
Scientists are already working on a series of IPCC reports due out over the next 3 years. The goal is to raise questions and understanding about climate change.
We are less than 1 week away from the Climate Action Summit, where environmental, governmental, and civil leaders come together to address climate change.
Cronkite News sustainability reporter Jordan Evans joins us in the studio to explain how climate change affects you.
We are continuing our coverage on climate change ahead of Monday's United Nations Climate Summit in New York City. And if you're curious about how climate change is affecting us here in Arizona, we have a lot of data from Climate Central to help explain this. Climate Central is an independent organization of leading scientists and journalists. The organization surveys and conducts scientific research and compiles records from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So when we think of national parks, we think of them as places to escape the heat. But climate change, it's affecting them too. And right here in Arizona, let's take you to the Grand Canyon and show you this. These are the average annual temperatures over the past 100 years. And notice the trend here. We're talking nearly 2.5 degrees of warming there at the top of the Grand Canyon since record keeping began in 1916. Now let's take you down to Saguaro National Park. Pretty much the same thing down there, except from all the way from 1916 to the current century, we're talking more than 3 degrees of warming. Now, 2 to 3 degrees may not seem like a lot of warming to you, but when you factor in climate change in the next 100 years, you know, we could be dealing with temperatures at the Grand Canyon just like here in Phoenix. According to Climate Central, out of 62 national parks analyzed, all of them but one shows a warming trend. This is in part because of the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which set a new high for the planet in the last 2 million years. CO2 is the leading cause of global warming, which means snow, ice, they're all disappearing from many parks. That allows the ground to absorb more solar radiation, which raises temperatures further. A warming planet will cause parks here in the Southwest to become drier, and according to a 2016 report from Climate Central, every park will experience, quote, a dramatic shift in its climate in the coming decades. Rising temperatures can impact visitation to the parks and threaten wildlife by making habitats not suitable. Let's switch gears now and talk about our major cities here in Arizona. In fact, in Tucson, we can talk about the number of days that are above 105 degrees. Take a look at this data from Climate Central. We're seeing a trend just like we saw with national parks, and we're talking about 17 more days where temperatures reach at least 105 degrees there in Tucson. Now here in the Valley of the Sun, we can take that number up just a little bit because of our elevation, but we're seeing the same pattern again. All the way from 1970 and to today's standards, we're seeing nearly 7 to 8 more days where temperatures are reaching at least 110 degrees. Not only does the urban heat island effect contribute to this, but when you put climate change on top of that, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Out of 244 cities analyzed by Climate Central, 75% of them recorded an increase in extremely hot days since 1970. Miami, Florida had the largest change of 90-degree-plus days, which was 75. The Center for Disease and Control says extreme heat is the deadliest of all weather hazards. And as we all know here in the Valley, extreme heat can take a toll on all of us during the summer. The Maricopa County Department of Public Health reported 182 heat-related deaths last year and 949 since 2010. The latest national climate assessment states that, quote, changes in extremely hot and extremely cold temperatures are projected to result in 9,000 deaths across 49 U.S. cities by the end of the century if we don't curb emissions. So we know that is a lot of information to take in, but we want to know, what is the one word that best describes your feelings about climate change? Share it with us on our Facebook page or tweet your word to us on Twitter at Cronkite News. Live in the Weather Center, Jordan Evans, Cronkite News.
The Amazon rainforest is on fire. Areas of the rainforest burn during the dry season every year, but this is the largest number of blazes in almost a decade.
Cronkite News reporter Jordan Elder explains what this means for us here in Arizona.
This year, the fires are bigger, more intense, and covering more ground. With the help of over 100 satellites up in space, scientists at Arizona State University are helping monitor the flames and the aftermath. ASU research professor David Pearson has been to the Amazon 95 times.
I started working in the Amazon in 1968. This is a wonderful place. The mosquitoes aren't that bad, and the snakes, you don't see them very often.
But Pearson is worried that when he returns in the spring, the rainforest he knows and loves may be unrecognizable.
I've never seen fires this extensive. Just the immensity of it is overwhelming. Yes, we've had fires before, but they were in the infrequent drought times.
This year, there have been more than 100,000 fires. These fires have burned land that's almost 3 times the size of the state of Arizona. A satellite imagery program called Planet is allowing ASU researchers to watch the fires.
It's printing out the image that you would end up getting.
And predict the environmental impact from above.
They're called CubeSats, and they're essentially the size of a loaf of bread, and they just send a bunch of these CubeSats into orbit, and they take data by taking pictures.
Researchers like Ovidiu Silic use the data that Planet collects. Silic can now start to estimate how much carbon is being released, something that could impact the rest of the world.
This will contribute to increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that will contribute to climate change and global warming, which doesn't necessarily have a local effect, but it will have a global effect.
Many outlets were reporting that the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the earth. But according to this data from Oxford University, that's not necessarily true. In fact, only about 1/3 of the oxygen produced on land even comes from rainforests, and only half of that is from the Amazon. The rest gets used through microbes, cellular respiration, and phytoplankton. So most of what we're breathing doesn't even come from the Amazon. Scientists aren't exactly sure what the long-term effects of these fires will be.
There's a lot of arm waving going on, and we need to do a lot of studies very quickly because it's happening so fast.
Pearson says he accepts that the Amazon is changing, but if fires like these become the norm, he says the plants and animals he's studied for so long may disappear. Experts believe cattle farmers may set fires intentionally to clear land for agriculture. The Amazon rainforest spans 9 countries, but most of it is in Brazil. The Brazilian government has banned all human-caused fires for 60 days in an attempt to better the situation, but it's unclear at this time if that order will be followed.
Thank you, Jordan. Now, not only is the Amazon burning, but social media is burning too, with a lot of information and misinformation.
But not all of it is accurate, right?
That's right. Celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio and politicians like French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron have shared images supposedly of the fires in the Amazon. But after looking a little closer, they're outdated. Macron posted this image on Twitter. The photographer of this photo, Lauren McIntyre, died in 2003. That means it's over 16 years old. And this photo from Leonardo DiCaprio was first posted online in 2017. DiCaprio has shared more current images since then.
So the information in the posts are correct, but the photos aren't.
And why is this so dangerous?
Well, these are people that have large social media audiences. And so these people are sharing and consuming their content, but if they don't verify the source of the information, it can lead to the spread of fake news. We talked to author and fake news expert Kai Shu about these images specifically.
The image, as you mentioned, is outdated, but it's a real image. And it's really, really hard for people to tell, well, okay, this is not actually really about this event, but it's about another event a long time ago. That's why usually the fake news is very hard to tell, is people tend to believe something they want to believe.
And so, Jordan, what can people do if they see images like these that are almost sort of too good to be true?
Well, there are a lot of reverse image searching apps for free online that you can plug the image into. It will pull up every single match for the image so you can see exactly where it came from. You can drag and drop a picture into Google Images just like this, and it'll show you any images that are visually similar to it. There's also a website called TinEye that you can install as a shortcut on Google Chrome. You can either upload the picture or the URL where you found it, and it will show you every single time that that photo or a piece of that photo appears online.
Thousands of students, including right here in Arizona, are expected to strike on Friday. They want to send a message to state and federal lawmakers that say they need policies to address this climate change.
All of this is happening ahead of the United Nations 2019 Climate Summit in New York City next week. Cronkite News reporter Jordan Evans recently went to a summit of young climate activists. And Jordan, what did you learn?
So Matthew, back in 2012, former U.S. President Barack Obama gave a speech in which he said, quote, "We want our children to live in a world without the destructive power of a warming planet." Earlier this month, more than 180 students, ranging from middle school to college undergraduates, came together for this summit. They're all worried about what a warming world could mean for them and future generations.
Being a sustainability student, I'm interested still in supporting environmental advocacy and sustainability policy.
This is the world they're inheriting, and they have, therefore, an extra right to be concerned, to speak out, and to ask for solutions.
ASU professor of history and sustainability Paul Hurt gave the keynote speech at this year's Arizona Youth Climate Summit. He says a lot of the solutions to help curb climate change will have to take place in the policy arena.
Political engagement is complicated and slow-moving and difficult. And in a lot of ways, the status quo has a lot of inertia, and it's difficult to come up with new policies to change the way we do things.
Hurt also told me in the last 2 years, he has noticed more students getting involved in climate activism. Part of it was a new president, then there was the March for Science in 2017, and now more recently, many of these same young climate activists protested outside of the Arizona state capitol in March to get the attention of lawmakers for the first time. This month's summit provided an opportunity for students to engage with elected officials again. However, this time, the students asked the state legislators the questions.
We're here to do our best to kind of hold elected officials accountable as well, because we like to think that we are, really uplifting other voices and making sure that opinions that normally wouldn't be expressed are expressed.
I want them to acknowledge that no member of society is powerless. I know a lot of people who say, you guys are just teens, you're so cute. I love how hard you're working, but I think we can actually affect actual change.
And the change that these Arizona students are pushing for is the same change that Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg is pushing. The 16-year-old recently traveled to New York City by sailboat to reduce her own carbon footprint, all for the upcoming United Nations Climate Summit next week. And for ASU student Jackson Schuffelbein, getting youth to collaborate with lawmakers to make change for the climate is something he knows well.
Back when I was in high school, I created a youth activist platform in Ohio, where I'm from, and I'm glad to be able to support other students here in Arizona doing the same thing. I think the key thing is to get organized and educated and come up with stories to tell about how climate change is affecting us all and what the challenges are for mitigating climate change in the future. Get people to focus on the next 2 or 3 or 4 generations that are really going to have to deal with the consequences of decisions that we make today.
Friday, these students will march from Phoenix City Council to the Arizona State Capitol to bring their concerns about climate to Arizona lawmakers.
This report is a part of Covering Climate Now, a global collaboration of more than 250 news outlets. To strengthen coverage of the climate story, check out more from our public partners in our Elemental Covering Sustainability collaboration at elementalreports.com.
A researcher has developed a possible life-changing technique to make plastic out of cactus juice.
But now the question is, can it be scaled up? Cronkite News reporter Jordan Elder takes us inside the operation.
It might seem hard to believe, but the future of these plastic bags might lie in prickly pear cactuses. America wastes a lot of plastic, and especially at the grocery store. Shoppers use almost 1 plastic bag per resident per day. And it's not just these plastic bags, it's bottles too. In 2015, Americans purchased about 346 bottles per person. That's almost a bottle a day. And this problem keeps growing. Less than 1/5 of all plastic is recycled globally. But there might be a new recipe to solve this plastic problem. Engineers in Mexico are beta testing a new chemical formula with cactus juice as the main ingredient. It was created by Sandra Pasco Ortiz, a chemical engineering professor at the University of the Valley of Atemajac in Zapopan. Juice is extracted from the cactus and mixed with additives that make it feel more like the plastic bags we're used to. Then it gets rolled out and dried. The whole process takes about 10 days. These cactus juice bags take 2 or 3 months to break down in soil, and only a week if they're put in water or compost. Normal plastic bags may take centuries to decompose. Prickly pears are all over Arizona, so these bags could potentially be produced right here if the technology takes off. Several companies are interested in collaborating with Ortiz, who has already filed for a patent for this technology. For now, keep your reusable bags handy, but prickly pear plastic could make its way to your grocery store in the coming years.
Tourism is a huge part of Sedona's economy, but city leaders and residents have concerns that their home may be loved to death. This spring, the town adopted a tourism plan put together with input from businesses, tourists, and residents. Charisma Sandoval tells us more about this scenic city's plan to manage their popularity.
Towering red rocks, scenic views, and 3 million visitors a year. Sedona has become one of the most popular destinations for tourists in Arizona.
Because it feels like we've gotten a million miles away from the city just only by driving for a few hours. And then on top of it, the town still feels small, still feels friendly, still feels connected to nature. Even though all these people visit, it hasn't lost all the things that made it special over the years.
And keeping Sedona special is exactly what the city hopes to do by instituting a sustainable tourism plan. The plan aims to balance the small town needs of residents with a world-class experience for visitors, all while protecting the environment and economy.
Tourism generates 10,000 jobs. It generates 77% of all of our city's sales taxes, which pays for all of our services that we enjoy as residents. But sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between the benefits of tourism and the pinch points of tourism.
Those pinch points include traffic, parking, overused trails, and noise. Jennifer Wesselhoff, president and CEO of the Sedona Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau, says the plan tries to take on these challenges without turning away the tourists the city relies on.
Tourism is the lifeblood of our community. It's the lifeblood of Sedona. And we want to make sure that we still can, manage the 10,000 jobs that are here that are relying on it.
Jim Allen has been bumping along the Red Rocks at the wheel of a Jeep as a tour guide for almost 25 years.
I think I have one of the best jobs in the world. It's play for me,
because I get to meet wonderful people from all the entire planet. I get to be outdoors every day out here in God's country, driving a Jeep around.
Alan says he's noticed the increase of tourists both in town and in the large groups he takes out on his Jeep. And while he's happy about the increased business, he worries about the toll on trails. Alan supports the sustainable tourism plan because he knows without this view, his business dies. The plan hits the trails hard, with programs to monitor usage, limit trailhead parking, and promote less traveled trails. Alan works to educate people about picking up trash, staying on the trails, and respecting wildlife.
I would like my great-grandkids to be able to see this as it is, to preserve it that way.
Education is a big part of keeping Sedona beautiful. The Chamber developed a pledge for tourists that reminds them, among other things, to not make their own trails, eliminate those single-use plastics, and to pack in and pack out.
That will give visitors the opportunity to share with their fans and friends that they're responsible temporary locals, really, while they're here.
Protecting the environment is also why Kathleen Ventura is part of the committee that helped with the Sustainable Tourism Plan.
We all have to take a hard look at our carbon footprint and what we're doing here and our social responsibility and sustaining Sedona and all of its glory, for as long as we can.
Ventura says with more tourists comes more responsibility for everyone, businesses, residents, and tourists. A big part of that plan asks businesses to find a way to reduce waste and increase recycling. Ventura's company Compost Crowd collects food scraps from residents and businesses in the area before they make their way to landfills.
Before we started Compost Crowd last year, there was literally no composting options in all of Yavapai County.
Now there are 10 businesses signed up for Compost Crowd. Incentives to get more businesses to use programs like this and use less energy and conserve more water are included in the sustainable plan. The city's looking at positive reinforcement more than rules and regulations to get everybody to buy into the new program. Tourists we talk to say they're happy to comply.
And there is a balancing of wanting to tend to nature and then also the culture of this little community. So the influx of that is unique, and I think Sedona has to kind of continue to be outside the box to stay itself.
Especially if it means keeping the view.
Pelicans usually aren't the first birds that come to mind when you think of Arizona.
But Cronkite News reporter Melanie Porter found out why these birds are making a stop here in the valley. Pelicans breed up by Canada, North and South Dakota, and Montana, and they migrate to the Gulf of Mexico. But I found out that more of these birds are wintering in Arizona because we offer prime living conditions. It's a shocking experience. They are so beautiful and almost confusing.
I knew what I was looking at, but I didn't really realize what I was looking at.
To see these wetland birds in Arizona.
Sometimes I'm not sure where I am.
Here in Arizona, we aren't really known for our pelicans, but pelicans are flying south for the winter and settling in man-made lakes all across the state for fresh fish and warm temperatures.
They breed much further north, they winter much further south, and then they just land on any of these water bodies.
Decreasing water levels in their natural habitats makes them an easy target to predators.
Their nesting island used to have water all around it, and it was free of any predators like coyotes. Well, now it's connected to the mainland, and coyotes can come out to where they nest.
But when pelicans come to Arizona, they land in maintained lakes, so they don't have to worry about predators or food. But they just follow the food.
These guys follow the food.
So that makes sense why they would be in kind of man-made lakes, because we put fish into them, right?
Exactly. So the pelicans have found great winter restaurants.
This isn't the first time pelicans have come to Arizona. Brown pelicans sometimes fly here to escape from coastal storms, but they used to be transported out of the state because we didn't have a suitable habitat for them.
Yeah, North American pelican is very different than your brown pelican, which is on the coast. North American pelicans are more inland and on lakes and rivers and whatever streams, so they're a welcome sight for Arizonans.
With the addition of large lakes and ponds in the valley, both brown pelicans and white pelicans are allowed to stay and enjoy our desert climate.
You know, we don't expect to see a water bird like this in the middle of the desert, so it's a treat.
And this unexpected guest has become a welcomed winter visitor for nature lovers of all ages. Melanie Porter, Cronkite News.
Once the weather starts to cool down, pelicans will continue on their journey south for the winter.
But until then, you can find them in places like the recharge ponds in Glendale and the Riparian Preserve in Gilbert. Back here in the valley, 3 elementary schools in Glendale closing for the day due to power outages caused by the severe weather. And the rain isn't going away anytime soon.
Well, flash flood watches will continue into the evening with back-to-back storm systems expected to top all of monsoon 2019 when it comes to rain totals. Cronkite News reporter Jordan Evans joins us live from downtown Phoenix.
Jordan, I see you have your umbrella in hand. Is it still raining out there?
Not currently raining at the moment. You know, the theme the rest of the afternoon has just kind of been off and on. We got a little bit of a shower about 10 minutes ago, and then we actually just got a really big gust of wind up here. We had to secure our camera here for a second, but that's going to be the theme, I think, for the next couple of hours. Daniel Malcolm will bring you your full forecast here in just a minute, but I want to show you a video from earlier today. This was the scene from the I-17 and Greenway in North Phoenix. Cars driving through what appears to be about 1 foot of water, which even caused some of those vehicles to stall. Police had to close this intersection temporarily too until the water receded. As much as 2 inches fell in parts of the North Valley today, so I sat down with the Flood Control District of Maricopa County for their advice to see how to stay safe on the roads.
Don't drive through flooded washes. If you see water, turn around, don't drown. You hear that slogan, but the point behind it is most of our flooding here happens quickly and it ends very quickly, so it's not worth risking your life for having to find an alternate route or waiting maybe 30 minutes till the water recedes. It doesn't rain a lot here. When it does, though, it can be high impact. It happens quick, and so just people being alert, being weather aware, being flood smart.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.